After a couple of years in purgatory, Payday Crime War is once again playable by the general public. Or more specifically, the lucky few who will be granted access to what is a pretty exclusive beta at this point. It launched late on the 6th of December to just 200 players out of North America, and once a few serious matchmaking bugs had been fixed, this very limited version of the mobile game was made accessible to European and South American Android players on the 9th. Fortunately, that included myself, so I've been playing it pretty much non-stop to get some early impressions for you. First of all, for those of you hoping to be chosen to join the ranks of us testers, this beta is going to be scaling up over the next week or so. I'm fairly certain that the hope is to get most people who signed up before the deadline in for at least a few games before the beta shuts down in roughly a fortnight's time. But I do want to keep everyone's expectations in check with this video. You're only seeing one map currently, PopReach's version of 4 stores, which is sadly the only map within this beta, and we're unlikely to see more until closer to launch. This comes as somewhat of a disappointment when we know they have concepts for many other maps ready to go, and the previous soft launch of Payday Crime War actually had more to play on. But I think it's because the team are purely looking to balance gunplay and control schemes within a controlled environment. I'm also going to generally avoid talking too much about the in-house designed Crime War we saw 2 years ago. This game is a complete departure from that one at the moment, trying much harder to be a mobile version of Payday 2 as opposed to an all-new class-based shooter, possibly a wise move to appeal to hardcore fans of the franchise. All that said, let's hop in game and see what the beta has to offer. First of all, you'll be asked to input a name, but don't worry, this isn't attached to an account and can be changed at any time. Remember, there's no progression in this beta, and all your stats from playing in it will not be saved. On the main menu, you can interact with a fairly limited UI at this early stage. You'll also hear the very familiar sound of Mayhem dressed in a suit, as at least for now, we'll mainly be hearing Payday 2 music within Crime War. From here, you can queue for a quick match, party it with friends, or take a look at game news and customize your settings. Right now, you can check out the patch notes in the news tab, and the settings are going to be fairly important when it comes to how you want to control your game, but more on that later. The social tab is surprisingly accessible, meaning you can add and party up with friends, although I've yet to test that matchmaking, and at a later date, we'll be able to start and join crews, which function as this game's social clan system. From the main menu, it's also possible for us to head to the all-important loadout page, which is where things get very interesting. Currently, the loadouts are limited and don't seem to show their stats properly, but there's still a lot to take on board here. Essentially, we can currently play as one of the core 4 heisters, Dallas, Hoxton, Chains and Wolf, who all have their own unique active ability and seemingly access to their own 3-way skill trees. This is incredibly exciting for those who love to tailor their playstyles and might offer some serious depth and customization, but it's impossible to tell right now as all skills are locked and it's uncertain how skill points are going to be handled. I also want to point out that none of the original cops from the previous version of Crime War are in the game at the moment. In fact, right now, it's a civil war of Payday Gang versus Payday Gang, who seem to be acting as placeholders, or at least so I hope. You see, nothing's been directly confirmed in terms of the game going back to being an isometric class-based shooter. The main game mode we're testing currently also doesn't make that much sense unless it's set up as gang versus gang warfare. Although having rival gangs like the Cobras or Mendozas involved could be cool as an opposition faction, it would be a shame to me to lose that cops versus robbers theme, and I expect we'll see it return in future phases of development. As for the active abilities of the 4 characters we do have access to, Dallas of course has his trusty medic bag which works in AoE heal for all within the radius, Hoxton has a skill called Lightweight which increases movement speed considerably for a short duration, Chains has Bullet Storm, which seems to massively increase fire rate and reload speed briefly, and Wolf has a Sentry Turret, which can be a nuisance and holds down choke points really well. I actually think all of these perks have somewhat of a place, but seeing as health regenerates manually, and the sentries are easy to take care of, I've been mainly using Bullet Storm as it will win you 2 or 3 versus 1 gunfights, or Lightweight as it makes running the objective a lot easier. From here, we also have to choose our Payday style loadouts consisting of a primary, secondary and throwable, which is currently more like equipment, as well as an armor option. For armor, we have the full array of Payday 2 options to choose from, which is a serious departure from the old Crime War classes. The mobility stat is currently visually bugged, but they range from providing 100 to 400 armor and limit your movement speed depending on their weight. The two throwables we have access to at the moment are the armor and ammo bags. They both recharge just like your character abilities and offer the only means to replenish otherwise finite resources in ammo and armor. It's interesting that you cannot pick up other weapons, so if you don't bring ammo, you will simply run out eventually, but the respawn time and map size does make armor the better option in my eyes. Both work just like the medic bag, providing their effects in AoE, which is much better than having to interact with them. Finally, we have the weapons. In the secondary slot, you have 3 pistols to choose from: the Benetti 9, the Chimano 88, and the Interceptor 45, although many more are set to be unlocked, including secondary SMGs like the Blaster 9mm and iconic shotguns like the Judge. Once we can use all weapons in game, there'll be a fairly serious roster to choose from. As for primaries, that statement goes even further. They're split into categories of assault, SMG, shotgun, LMG, and sniper, with pistols exclusively being in the secondary category at the time of recording, and once fully unlocked include 32 weapons ported straight across from Payday 2. Admittedly, most are assault rifles, but there's still more variety than I expected. Sadly, we cannot test shotguns or snipers as they are currently locked completely, but in the assault category we can choose from the AK-74, AMCAR and Falcon. For SMGs it's just the Mark 10, and LMGs it's the KSP-58. I'll go deeper into gun balance and optimal loadouts later, but it's fairly predictable. The KSP dominates just like in Payday 2. I think if we're going to work out the overall state of balance, it's fairly pivotal that we're also able to test snipers and shotguns at some point, as they tend to be the trickiest to get right. Moving on, let's actually talk about the gameplay, which is surely what most of you are here for. Sadly, CrimeNet is not open, meaning PvE heist is still hidden for now, so it's just the new PvP mode called Cash Grab to try. It's a 4v4 mode currently played on the only map 4 Stores, which is a uniquely PvP designed crossover between the original 4 Stores map and Crossroads from Payday 2, which is actually pretty functional in terms of sightlines and flanking routes. It's small and will get repetitive, but definitely not a bad map on the surface. The mode itself is also pretty cool. It's a take on the classic capture the flag formula, but with a Payday twist, as both sides have a safe they must protect and attack respectively on a relatively symmetrical map. When in the proximity of the enemy safe, you can point your heister at it and start taking money out in increments of $20,000 up to a maximum of $100,000, at which point you must carry the bag back to your own safe and bank the cash to your side. This is a tug of war formula, so if you kill someone carrying loot, you can steal their bag and take it back home. But importantly, both sides start with $1.5 million, so even if money is stolen and not secured, it will still hurt the opponent's point total until they retrieve it. I really like the way this works on the surface, but there are a few serious flaws I've found. For instance, once you've taken a lead, the combat mechanics are non-existent, and simply camping your own safe is the dominant strategy, which leads to a pretty toxic meta forming. There is nothing that forces the team in the lead to come out and fight, so I'd suggest the addition of a neutral objective that spawns 2.5 minutes into the 5-minute game mode and provokes a more even gunfight. The other issue I have is more on the side of controls. Interactions are painfully clunky in this game, and this mode is highly contingent on them. To interact, you simply need to look directly at the thing you're aiming to interact with, but that means it's very hard to do other things like engage in a decent gunfight. I know this is sort of emulating Payday 2's interaction mechanic, but that works because the game is PvE and all about time management. In PvP games, things should be faster and more convenient, so I'd recommend proximity or button-based interactions when taking loot or reviving to enable players to actually fight back and for gameplay to feel a little more fluid. As for that gameplay, it's definitely fun, but still needs polish. I know you shouldn't expect a beta to be polished, but this game has had years in the oven at Starbreeze, and yet still feels a little like an alpha to me. Admittedly, PopReach have seemingly completely overhauled the game to make it more like Payday 2, but it's still rough around the edges. I've personally fallen through the ground briefly, and I've witnessed other human players do the same thing mid-gunfight. Speaking of gunfights, I don't find that I'm getting enough feedback to indicate the damage I'm taking. I find the health and armor UIs a little too minimalist and not as vibrant as the old one, which can't be helping. Often when I die, I don't really know how or why, possibly because it's usually a bot doing the killing, but even so, I seldom feel like I've been outplayed or outplayed another player when I get a kill because the fights are just so vague. When you do kill someone, you'll often find yourself frustrated by them entering the bleed out state. As a human player, you may as well always speed up your revive. There's virtually no way you're getting back up, but bots love staying like this, which feels like an unnecessary feature that's simply slowing the game down. I'm generally against final stand mechanics unless it's a one lifeline game mode. I have to admit though, a lot of these problems come down to the players in-game, which at this point are predominantly bots. The busiest lobby I've seen was a 2v2 with 4 extra bots, which is to be expected when so few people have access to the game. The bots, by the way, are actually much better than I'd anticipate, and I'm glad they exist. They play the objective avidly, take fair gunfights with the player without having god aim, and can oftentimes be mistaken for a real player, which is the greatest compliment. But it's sadly still not the same as testing the game alongside real players. Until I've had a true 4v4 with humans, it's tough to really judge the balance of the gameplay or how well I'm actually playing. Getting down to the core shooting mechanics though, I found that some guns simply kick too much to really be used as intended. I'm fine with weapons having recoil, but taking the stability and accuracy system from Payday 2 feels ill-advised, and since you're stuck with these weapons as they're currently modified, you'll find things like the Falcon AR are really hard to control with its range scope. Which brings me neatly onto the control scheme. Now, I'm no expert on mobile FPS control schemes, so this one could be excellent, but at least in my experience, there are a few frustrations. For one, I have a tendency to accidentally press my throwable when I'm moving my character, which can be a little intrusive. On the opposite side of the screen though, I find the reload, crouch and jump buttons hard to hit accurately whilst in a gunfight. These are the sort of things that need to be used fluidly, so it may be worth altering them into multi-tap input controls. My greatest gripe and frustration though is absolutely with reloading. I find myself doing it constantly, and it's often interrupted by me accidentally moving too quickly and starting to sprint. This feels so clunky and leads to me often engaging fights without having reloaded already. The shooting though, when everything's working, feels pretty good. I have the auto aim on and my aim sensitivity pushed up to 70% for faster turning speed. I've been sort of torn between auto aim down sight and auto fire though. If you have both of these on, the game will automatically aim you in and start firing whenever you scan over a viable target. The constant ADSing is really intrusive in my opinion, but the auto fire can be really helpful and allows you to just focus on your aim. I've had success with both options turned off and actually playing manually, as well as with the auto fire mode on. I think it's really dependent on your experience with mobile shooters, and actually the gun you're using, as some are very hard to control when they fire at will. A good set of accessibility options for new players though. Which brings me on to the final point of this initial feedback from my end, game balance. It's hard to go too deep when we only have about 20% of the eventual weapon pool available for selection in game and no player skills or perks, whilst also only playing one map and game mode. With at least a domination-styled drill defense probably coming back in some capacity, it's tough to say too much with certainty, but at least on 4 stores, you're almost certainly best off with the KSP-58, Interceptor 45, Armor Bag, and ICTV whilst playing Chains for Bulletstorm. The KSP does a lot of damage quickly at all ranges and doesn't run into the constant reload issue. When paired with Bulletstorm, you can easily spray and pray and get a reasonable reload in thanks to the speed buff. The Interceptor is the only secondary with decent stopping power I found, whilst the Armor Bag feels most useful for holding a defense at the safe. That in mind, you may as well run the ICTV as it's hard to even notice it slowing you down when defense is generally better than offense. I have a secondary build with Hoxton, the AK and ammo bags, which feels great for actually running the objective, but isn't as powerful in a gunfight. In generally, I've found the other weapons don't really compare with the AK or KSP. In particular, the Mark 10 is strange in that it feels like it should be doing massive DPS, but I think I'd be better off with an LMG in virtually every situation. I think if movement was more encouraged mechanically, this campy setup would be less dominant, but until that's the case, you may as well rock the LMG and pretend you're playing Payday 2. So overall, I see a ton of potential here, but also enough rawness that our feedback is very much so necessary. I like the PopReach at tackling the core mechanical elements of the game first, but would like to know more about the eventual vision they have for it to help inform my feedback. However, at least at a surface level, I'm really happy to say Crime War is evolving into an experience that will be enjoyed by more core Payday fans, and seemingly has more emphasis on playstyle variation and character builds, as well as the eventual addition of the PvE mode. In terms of how the game runs currently, I have a middle of the range phone and found it to be fairly stable even when screen capturing. Depending on the game, I had between 30 to 120 ping, which felt fairly playable across the board. The beta is only about 300 MB, so everyone should also be able to try it out. If you didn't sign up on time, but you're interested, join the discussion in the Crime War Discord server, link below, and stay tuned on this channel as I cover the game's life cycle all the way to full release. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very soon. As ever, thank you very much to my Mean Infamy patrons and above. If you want to join that infamous club to see yourself in the credits or get early exclusive access to my videos, including the story videos, check out my Patreon, link below. Remember, the Discord is open to all if you crave some more Payday discussion. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very soon for the next one.